Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Neidl. I'm the co-founder of the OpenAir Collective. Thanks so much for joining today's session. Today, we're going to get into really the details and give you sort of a sneak preview of the CarbonCrowd platform, which you may have attended some of the early sessions throughout the week where there was a lot of reference to it. It's the name that we're giving to a series of webinars we're having here during COP27 on the carbon removals at COP platform. And what that refers to is a new program area for OpenAir, where folks or teams within our community who are working on interesting CDR related technologies in an open source way, when they want to optimize particular parts of their projects or the technologies they're working on, or they want a broader audience to take it in new directions, we wanted to create a real platform that sort of structures that activity, that allows our members to really present to the world the problems that they're working on and allow teams of people from all over the world ultimately to contribute to the improvements that they're seeking. So the idea for that kind of arose out of what OpenAir already was. There's a lot of folks within our community that work on open source technology related to carbon dioxide removal. So from that activity, the idea of CarbonCrowd arose. And who I'm joined by today, we call ourselves the three Chris's. Chris Neidl. I also have Chris Donnelly in Ireland and Chris Couchoud in Pennsylvania. The other two Chris's really stepped up and said, well, let's build this. And they come from software development backgrounds and interaction design backgrounds. And over the last 2 months or so, they've been planning out an actual online platform that will facilitate the types of activities that I just described, and again, which have been alluded to in previous webinars during the week. So we thought what we would do is talk to the people behind the curtain where the platform currently stands. We're looking at a launch in the not too distant future. So today you'll hear from both Chris's. Start with Chris Donnelly. Will lead us off to give us a tour of how this platform is going to work, so you'll get a better sense of the functionality. And then we're going to have a little bit of discussion about where we want to take this, what we think is actually going to be next, and what makes us most excited about what it's bringing to the world as a project. So Chris's, pleasure to have you here. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, Chris. I'll do the kind of overview piece, and I'll start with a slide or two, if that's all right.
Yeah, please.
You guys can see that?
We can.
So CarbonCrowd, this is our working logo with all the ants, because that's a super intelligence collective, is a group of ants, very like OpenAir or CarbonCrowd. And the idea behind it is basically, as Chris Neidl was saying, is it's kind of a platform to bring members of the carbon removal community together to sort of solve problems and focus on specific aspects of, say, carbon dioxide removal technology or sequestration technique or something like that, to see if they can optimize them. And it's very much kind of centered around this idea of challenges, and then there's teams that participate in challenges, and there's people who organize the challenges. And so at a high level, you could be someone who's got an idea for, say, a direct air capture unit, or maybe some novel innovation around, kelp farming or something like that. And you might want to organize a challenge around that. And you could, using the CarbonCrowd platform, you can do that. And you can put a call out to the community, and people who've got the necessary skills and motivation to be interested can kind of participate in the challenge. And then there's a kind of the challenge will run for a period of time, and the person who wins the challenge can be awarded an award. And that kind of at a high level is roughly speaking it. That's the kind of the first version that we're going for with this thing. So this is a kind of a very loose diagram, but to show you what it might actually look like in reality, we've got a kind of a working prototype here. And kind of when you come in, you get to see a kind of a list of all the current challenges that are open. For the first version, we're just going to have one running at a time. And then we'll be kind of expanding it out as the whole thing grows. A user can come in, they can decide to enter a challenge. This one is obviously about optimizing the Cyan direct air capture unit. The Cyan's a bit of a celebrity in the OpenAir community, as we all know. It's a small direct air capture unit that you can build at home. And in this kind of one, we're talking about maybe seeing if we can optimize the amount of CO2 that the unit can capture within a certain time period. So against a particular challenge, you can have a number of projects submitted where teams can come together and put together their designs and kind of submit them to the challenge. And then when the challenge ends, each of these things will be assessed, in this particular case, on the amount of CO2 they can absorb, and then a winner will be announced. You can look at past competitions and you can see, okay, here's a leaderboard of people who've won. This particular group here absorbed the most carbon in that particular case, and they won that particular challenge. And yeah, I think that's kind of roughly speaking it. There's another part to it as well, which is all about the teams. And so what we wanted to do is make sure that it was a very kind of very similar to OpenAir. It was a very low barrier to entry for this particular platform. So anyone can come to this thing and anyone can participate. Anyone can join a team or anyone can create their own team. And the only barrier to entry really is your motivation to participate and your willingness to learn about the particular CDR technology or technique that's being kind of worked on in the challenge. So yeah, I don't know, Couchoud, do you have anything you want to add? This is a very high level run through.
Yeah, I don't think you've missed anything. I mean, I think this is it in a nutshell. It's a platform for hosting competitions and then putting a team together to tackle them. And this is where we're going to start. I think we're having being a software engineer for 20 years, I'm under no misconception that when we release this, it's not going to turn into something else. And that to me is where the interesting part is going to come from this. So we're looking forward to getting it out in front of people and see how it lives and grows.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, Chris. The webinar that released yesterday on the Carbon Removal at COP virtual pavilion about the AirSynth project. We kept stressing that this is what we're planning to start with, but who knows what it will become. And I think even during the course of us thinking through this, when we thought about the kinds of projects that might be hosted on it, they were relatively narrow and related to a set of missions that are already happening within OpenAir. And then as you guys started to develop this, I'm like, well, this is really kind of a universal platform. You could really conceivably put anything up as a challenge. And so it got me thinking about not just across all the R&D type of projects that we have going on at OpenAir, but even our legislative projects. You could have a challenge around developing a bill around a particular subject. We had our first OpenAir commissioned short story was released during COP27. It was amazing, called The Collector by Andrew Dana Hudson. You could have a short story competition. There's many different things you could do on this. And I think what it really adds to the OpenAir community is it puts a sort of a filter or some structure on what our community is coming with so many people and so much churn around ideas. Let's give it a bit of a structure and some schedule. And that's an important thing too that we decided early, which I think is a feature we should keep, is we want to kick this off in the beginning of 2023, but having really regular paced events, like at least every month, that there's some kind of challenge that's happening that I think really gives it a pulse so that we can see things moving fast, is really important. So CarbonCrowd will be hosting new challenges every month, which is a pretty rapid release schedule. Great. Well, let me ask a little bit about you guys. I mean, this is the thing we always want to, sometimes people, I think OpenAir is becoming more, familiar to people involved in the carbon removal world. Our membership grows all the time. And one of the things we always want to stress to people is that we're not a formal organization. We're a network that lives on a digital platform called Discord, kind of like Slack, where people can talk in channels. It's sort of like a forum. And everything that we do is contributed by volunteers. And sometimes those volunteers collaborate from various different parts of the world, and they connect to make things. And this is an instance of this. This is amazing, little team where you guys just picked this up and really, really ran with it. And we're close to actually release. And we have huge gratitude for that. But I wonder if you could just, tell who's tuning in a little bit about yourselves and how you got into OpenAir. And I'll kind of go into chronological order. I'll start with Chris Donnelly, who's are you in Dublin, Ireland right now, or are you elsewhere?
Just south of Dublin in Ireland. I don't think the community will know where Greystones is, but if anyone does, shout out. So I got drawn into this. Well, so I'm a kind of, user experience design software guy. I'm not a scientist. I'm not like an engineer or anything like that. Like contributing to sort of solutions for climate change. Yeah, I've been casting around for a long time to figure out how I could maybe get involved and do something meaningful beyond, maybe doing recycling more. And I encountered the OpenAir community, and then through kind of getting involved in that and having a dialogue with yourself, Chris Neidl, and the others in there, and seeing some of the projects that have been going on, it kind of evolved into this idea here, which is obviously directly things. It's a piece of software. It's a web application. It's obviously user experience is a big component of it. So that's kind of how I ended up here. I don't know. Are you still with us, Chris Neidl? You seem frozen on the screen.
No, I'm here. I'm just intently listening. But you also came via a very cool T-shirt, which I could also link in the notes too. You designed our I
should have been wearing it.
Yes, I love the T-shirt, which is a top seller. So a man of many talents. And you also, I think, first really came in through the Ireland group we have at OpenAir, which is working on a policy proposal, which has made a lot of progress. So I think that was your channel in it, if I remember correctly. And Couchoud, it's probably been about, I don't know, how long has it been? 4 months, maybe 5 months? I'm not even
Maybe.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't seem very long. I mean, it's funny. Also, Chris Donnelly, he's like, I'm an engineer by profession, a software engineer, but I wouldn't call myself a scientist. Like, I think applying the word engineer to a software developer is an interesting uh thing there. But I run a small business consultancy shop, and honestly, I was just looking for a way to fill some hours. Like, we have ebb and flows in our work, and I wanted to contribute some hours to a nonprofit or another organization that needed help on the software engineering side. And literally the week me and my partner decided to do that, I saw a call for help that one of my former coworkers had posted for an OpenAir, and how they needed engineers to help out with this new project that they were developing. So I took that as Kismet, and I immediately sent an email and talked to Chris, and here I am, however many months later, working on this project. I've always been a big fan of like citizen science, and like I think, in my heart, I want to be a scientist and work in a lab and play with test tubes and all those things. But I've always just liked the idea of citizens contributing in a pragmatic way to these problems that politicians sort of always spin their wheels on. So I've participated in multiple programs over the years, and I have two young boys who, they're growing up in this world where climate change is becoming increasingly a issue that they're gonna have to deal with directly. It seems like. So it's just, one of those things that's been on the forefront of my mind. So after talking to Chris and Nigel and learning more about the project, just seemed like a perfect fit. Like I said, Kismet a few sentences ago, it just seemed to make sense to hop on board and contribute.
Yeah, you've made a huge contribution, both of you, and this is within OpenAir. I mean, it really is. It's really been, for the most part, just the two of you, and it's been a lot of hours that you've put into it. So, we're really thankful, really excited to see where it goes. And one thing I'll quickly mention, just to give people a clearer sense of what might appear, we were kind of talking somewhat in the abstract around the types of projects, but for those of you who didn't tune in to the other CarbonCrowd webinars that were featured on the virtual pavilion this week, we are already looking at a real great diversity of projects that'll probably be 1, 2, or 3, not certain of which order. So for one is, will be in the show notes, is Octavia, which is a Kenyan direct air capture startup, where two other engineers fresh out of college designed a functioning small 1 ton per year direct air capture unit. And they feature that in the other webinar. But they've decided to open source that DAC, which will actually make it the first true open source DAC project in the world. And while it's functional now, they know it's a prototype and it has to go a long way before it really has use value. So there's many different parts of what they want to focus on right now to try to optimize around the heat use and different material use. And so it's very likely within the first couple of months of launch, a Octavia, the project's called Thursday, related project will be featured. We also had the folks from Prisma joined us, which is a collaborative project from multiple different universities that are working on applying basically supercomputing to discovering different forms of sorbent for direct air capture, because sorbent's the magic material that absorbs and releases the carbon. And we've only really just scratched the surface on what the optimal materials for that are. And so they've developed this platform that is designed to really quickly characterize, and with some machine learning, compare the samples as they go and allow us to sort of zero in for millions of different materials, possibly to ones that are more optimal for different conditions. So we're definitely going to do a challenge related to that. That one might even be their biggest thing right now, is getting people to use it. So that one might be almost like who can actually promote this the most and get the most amount of uploads of materials to really populate. So that's a very different kind of challenge. And then thirdly is AirSynth, which I just mentioned, which is one of our members, Anirudh Sharma, has been working on for a year. And this is a little micro module. It's a catalyst that converts, electroreduces carbon into other materials that can be used. And that's been a fascination of many people within our community really from the beginning is, can we start at the edges doing things with carbon? And so they've come up with this very, very cool now prototype that we want to take in a lot of different directions. And so that's really going to be for hackers and for university teams. So that just gives you a sense of some very different things. And I could mention other ones too, but in terms of the initial pipeline, that's what we're looking at for probably competitions 1, 2, and 3. So which is quite exciting. Well, let me ask you guys also as well. We kind of started off with this is we can only speculate. You can only guess. But when you think about it, you've just spent several weeks and months in some cases focusing on this and getting this off the ground. So obviously you think it has legs and it has a future. But when you allow yourself to sort of think in the future about what this might become or why it might be important, is there anything you could share, that sort of how you sort of envision maybe the future of this, even in the near or long term?
I'll take a stab at this. So, I mean, to be honest, like CDR is still something I'm learning a lot about. I sort of came in and just dove into the deep end on this project. And I'm continuing to learn a lot as I go through this process. But, when I try to explain to people what I'm working on the side, I talk a lot about like X Prize and those other things that have come about, right? That have redefined, like look at SpaceX, that came out of the X Prize stuff that has redefined what space travel is like. There was one recently, the name is escaping me, but they did one in Philadelphia recently, which isn't too far from me, that was for medical devices. And one of the groups actually had a working prototype that was almost like the thing they use in Star Trek, the like tricorder device that they're now in development trying to, make an actual working device that they can distribute and market, so on and so forth. So when I think of what we're doing here, that's what I think about. And that's how I explain it to people. Like the sky's the limit, we're building the platform, but it's really the people with the ideas that are going to come in and probably change things, so that's what I look at when I think of the work we're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a bit of a meta solution, isn't it? It's a kind of like it's creating a container and a place where people can go, and it allows the innovation to happen within that framework. So I think that's the big opportunity with this CarbonCrowd thing. The other thing that I was thinking of there when you asked that question, Chris Neidl, was that book Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry of the Future, the kind of climate change novel. When I read that, there's quite a lot in that book, but there's one particular paragraph that I remember reading and it kind of jumped off the page at me. He talks about DIY DAC becoming a thing in the future. And I kind of read that and I was like, that's kind of it. You know what I mean? Like we want to create a place or we want to create a world where like people can be like, oh yeah, I need to get involved. I want to take some carbon out of the air. And there should be kind of like technologies and innovations and even ways for people to earn money out of doing it. And I think this CarbonCrowd thing definitely can become a piece of that kind of vision that he was putting together in that book. So yeah, I mean, like say, sky's the limit. I think it could go anywhere. I think you just point at 3 amazing technologies, AirSynth, Octavia, and Prisma, which if we can get them on the thing, that'll be unreal. Like if we could even drive, a little bit of innovation for each of those projects, I mean, I'd die a happy man.
Yeah. And I think, OpenAir, as you've spent a lot of time with me and other, kind of core members of the community, that the idea is that right when we're at the peak and most sort of scary anxiety inducing moment with climate change, where it seems that, maybe it's hopeless, is that I think for a lot of people, it's not within their field of vision, the new capabilities that are just latent in the environment now that allow put an enormous amount of power in people's hands. And particularly if you can have that quote that you led me on to that people will have seen in the beginning of the intro about if, with enough small things put together in the right way, you can solve anything. I think that capability is arriving just in time for us to actually solve massive problems like climate change. And so humbly, OpenAir was just sort of founded on a sense that's possible. What I think CarbonCrowd is doing, again, is that sometimes people come into OpenAir and it's like a crazy city and they don't know where to go. This will be something that I think will really put a very specific lens or framework around the cool stuff that we're trying to do. And I think that's the thing that will really potentially unlock mass participation, as we grow and really get a lot of people involved. So So I'm really excited about it. And I think we're probably about, I think we should say January 1st, it could be earlier than that, but let's not overpromise. But I think we're close. Is that we should,
we're
probably,
close.
Yeah, we're close. Yeah.
Feel
We'll
it.
do some internal tests and things like that. And then maybe, go live. But yeah, if, again, I just want to thank the two of you so much, for making this contribution. I can't wait to see it. I know we also haven't mentioned Ange Tran, who's now another member of the team who's doing some really awesome design work. I think she brought the ants into the aesthetic, although it's always a favorite of mine. So big shout out to her as well, and some other folks as well who have contributed. But we did get a URL for this, carboncrowd.cc. So that will be linked to the OpenAir website, and you'll see it in the show notes. But and you will also see in the show notes a form if you're particularly interested in this project, and either as a potential future participant or someone who's maybe interested in helping run and organize. There's going to be some, management requirements for CarbonCrowd. Let us know. Reach out. Everybody is welcome. Doesn't matter what your background is or what your line of work is or what you're into. There's ways of plugging in and contributing. So, want to thank you. Anything else from you guys before we sign out? Shall we call it a session?
I think I'm
I
good.
think we're good. Yeah. Just remember to buy a copy of the Basalt T-shirt as well. That's
Yeah, you should have worn it.
That's the main thing.
That is the great
I should have worn
If
it.
you go to the OpenAir merch, why not? I'll throw that in the show notes as well. We make some really cool T-shirts that our members make, and Chris Donnelly is a very talented designer. Created a kind of an I heart with the OpenAir square basalt with some fun facts about basalt carbon sequestration at the back, and it's now become our top selling T-shirt. So. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining us. I appreciate it. And I'm going to sign out from Sharm el Sheikh. And folks, keep your eyes peeled for CarbonCrowd CC. Thank you very much.